Hey guys, let's try this again. So I am uploading this video to address your questions, talk about what's going on in the class, and get things rolling again. I haven't talked to you guys in what feels like a couple weeks. I have been quarantined. I was exposed to work. So I am finishing up my second week. I am allowed to go back into the public on Saturday. So I'll probably go out and find myself a nice state park, take the stroller and play around a disc golf or something. Just get outside, get away from the property here. Thankfully, we've got about 15 acres and I've been able to stay busy and get a lot of things done around here. What has been difficult is working. I left some things at school not knowing that I was going to be quarantined. So with that being said, I do not have our textbooks, so I can only talk about the topics for this week. I can't really talk about the exact text per se. We will dive back into the exact texts next week once I am allowed to go back to school. With that little intro, let's dive into a little bit of housekeeping. What we are looking at, you guys have AB3 due on the 28th at 11:59, so that would be Monday, and you guys will have the whole weekend. I am in the process of grading everything that was turned into me. I do have about 4 assignments that I need to look at, and I will be all caught up on that. When we look at the syllabus, you guys should have already turned in mini lesson 1, mini lesson 2, AB1, and AB2. I have uploaded some mini lesson exemplar videos in the content section of Brightspace. I want you to take a look at that. Because I cannot address specific content this week, I'm going to put up another podcast that I want you guys to check out. Very beneficial. It's Angela Watson's Truth for Teachers. She's fantastic. She is an advocate for teachers' 40-hour work week. She's a very forward thinker, and she's probably one of the most beneficial podcasts that you'll find as a teacher. So I'm going to put a link to a podcast that I want you guys to check out from her. Okay, so I am going to dive into questions that I may not have answered and get going from there. What things can I do if a student does not sleep enough and has trouble staying awake and engaged in class? The first thing to do is find out why that student is so tired. We have issues in my district where our students are oftentimes doing way more than you would think in the home. You could have a student that is acting as an adult while the parent works nights. You could have a student that's acting as an adult in the morning for their brothers and sisters while their parents are off at work. So our kids nowadays have a lot of extra responsibilities that we may not have had growing up. In my specific case, I had 2 very involved parents. I am the oldest of 6, so as I got older, I did take on more responsibility, but it was out of a willingness to help my parents and lighten their load more than a need or a necessity for my siblings to survive. If the student is not able to stay awake, there are a couple things that you can do. You can get creative. You can do a little bit of a flipped classroom situation where you send them home with things that they need to do, as far as watching educational videos or reading or different things like that, and then just working on assignments with them in your class. And other things you can do are, more group work, proximity to the student, engaging each student every period is very important, and having one-on-one connections seems to pay big dividends. So our next question When teaching in a secular classroom, how do we deal with staying true to our beliefs while at the same time respecting the evolutionary standards that we are required to teach to our students? This is very difficult for a lot of people, and I think that this ultimately goes to a personal conviction. Are required to teach the standards. Now, it doesn't mean that you have to spend an abundance of time on it, but you do owe it to your students to prepare them for what is on state tests. In my case, I look at the scientific approach and explaining exactly what they're going to see on the test and how they're expected to understand it, and then we move on. I do have peers that take that week off. They get a sub in, have the sub teach it for a day or two. Or they show a video over it with a sub. So it isn't as prevalent as you think, because a lot of our science classes don't focus wholly on evolution. Physical sciences, geology, different physics, earth sciences, environmental sciences. There are all those things that we cover that really don't so much look at the past. They focus more on what's happening now and understanding the world that we're living in now. And that's what I recommend you do when you teach these classes, is communicate the information you're required to communicate, but focus on what's happening in the world today, because kids will be more engaged by something that they might have an opportunity to observe than something that they're speculating on. Next question. What is your opinion on homework? Do you try to focus the majority of your students' work in class, or do you send students back home with homework? I have never been a supporter of homework. I work in a very socioeconomically depressed school district with a lot of single parent and zero parent households. And what I mean by that is that there are grandparents, foster parents, aunts, uncles that take care of a lot of my students. So what we're looking at in this type of situation is kids may not have the opportunity to be as successful at home as they do at school. I can control the environment they have at school. I can control the information they get. I can control what they're doing and whether or not they need extra assistance. And I want my kids to like school. I don't want my kids to have to go home, worry about feeding brothers and sisters, taking care of a household, going to work. I had a student last year that worked 3 jobs during her senior year, and she was taking care of brothers and sisters. When you throw meaningless homework on top of that, something's got to give. And is it fair for that student who is grinding to be a successful young adult and make sure that her brothers have everything they need? Is it fair for her to graduate with a D average, even though she's very intelligent, just because she doesn't have the time to sleep and work 3 jobs? No. And that's something that a lot of our peers need to come around to. Sometimes the old ways of lecturing in class and giving homework, sometimes they are just not efficient and not effective and definitely not best practices. And we need to move on from doing things just because they're the old way and do things that are best for our students. And I think that homework that is in that vein, giving 50 math problems, 25 science problems, when you go home, I don't think that that's not improving anybody's understanding, and it's definitely not promoting learning. I think that if you are to assign something to do at home, it can serve as a motivator to do things in classes. For instance, in every one of my math classes, I assigned 10 to 15 math problems at the end of the period with 15 minutes left. If my students used their time wisely, they could finish and have a couple minutes free time. If my students piddled around and didn't use their time efficiently, they had to finish it for homework or in study hall. So that was a motivator to work in class. And the days of administrators sitting and telling you your kids have to work right up until the bell, every kid, every period, those days are long gone, because our administrators are starting to realize now that kids work at a different pace. And while you have to prepare work that meets the needs of most of your students, you're going to have situations where you're over challenging some and under challenging others. And it's really important that you find the middle ground and then adjust. So I know I got a little off topic, but not a fan of homework. And the last question is, how do you motivate the unmotivated student? So the unmotivated student is a multi-pronged problem. First thing you need to do is develop a relationship with that student. We always talk about how you need to take care of the Maslow before you can take care of the Bloom. You have to make sure that your students' needs are met. And if they're not having their needs met, they're not going to be motivated to do anything. So if it's a food need, if it's a sleep need, if it's a care need, if it's, just some attention, just feeling like somebody cares if they're showing up, that's really important. And your students aren't going to be motivated until you take care of the Maslow. Once you take care of the Maslow, there are many different ways. The first way is to engage your students in conversation often. Don't let one kid sit in the back of the room and never talk to them. Maybe it's a shy kid and you need to catch them at the end of class or before class and see what makes them tick, or invite kids up, during their study hall to kind of figure out, what can I help you with? What do you need? That kind of thing. It's really important that you take time to get to know your students, because ultimately the personal relationships are what help motivate students. Okay, so that's the end of the questions that you guys have sent me. The last thing I want to talk about is your mini lessons. Please take a look at the mini lessons that I've put up. They're very beneficial. What I'm not seeing from you is you acting like you're standing in front of the class. What I want you guys to think about is look at these mini lesson videos as practice for your Ed TPA. I think that's really important. You need to think of these as trial runs for that assessment, because it is really a big part of what we're doing now. And you're going to end up doing a lot of field experience over distance learning, I feel like. I don't feel like distance learning is a thing that's going away. I feel like it's a thing that's going to become more prevalent, even as we, approach the fall, and, there have been talks about a fall surge with the virus. And here I am at home feeling great, but I was exposed to someone, and I have to teach you guys through distance learning. So it's not just a hoop that I'm making you go through. It's the reality of the world that we live in today. So stay safe. God bless. And if you have any questions, email me. See ya.